So today on my main channel I published a video about attention deficit disorder. Now if you haven't seen that video, make sure you go watch it so that this one will make sense. It's gonna be right here and also in the description down below, like always. That channel is gonna be for like shorter, funnier videos, kind of faster pace, and then this stuff here is gonna be a little bit more drawn out, so if you don't want to tune into this stuff, you know, just watch the regular channel. But I wanted to talk a little bit more about attention deficit disorder. I talked a lot about what it's like having attention deficit disorder, and already some people have commented that, you know, this is the same exact thing that they go through, or they have a spouse that kind of goes through the same things. I'm gonna talk about how I was when I was in school, when I was in the workplace, how I found out that I have ADD. I'm also gonna talk about the good and the bad about medication, and also what you should do if you think you have ADHD or your child has ADHD or ADD. First, when I was in school, I was actually a pretty bad student. The thing was, like, I wasn't a dumb kid. I was a smart kid. All the teachers said, "You're a smart kid, but..." insert some comment about my behavior. I couldn't focus, I acted out a lot, and I caused a lot of havoc. Now keep in mind that I lived in Mexico for 10 years and they had a totally different way of disciplining kids. I will leave it at that. Now when I came back to the States and I started learning English, I initially had a lot of issues. I went on through middle school and high school and it was the same thing. It got so bad at one point that my dad had to send me back to Mexico to work with my grandfather in the fields. Yep, that is me working my ass off in the summer. That was my dad's way of straightening me out, and straighten out I did, kinda. So I barely got through high school and graduated, went on to college where I could decide what I wanted to do with my life. I tried everything from theater to cinema, television, art, psychology, sociology, and a bunch of other things. Eventually I settled on electronic media management, which was basically the business side of television and film, because I wasn't able to get into film school. Then I went into the workplace. I actually had a job as a trainer for a long time that I really enjoyed and I excelled at. Anything that had to do with coming up with big ideas and communicating, hanging out with people, I was really good at. The stuff that I wasn't so good at was the stuff that was repetitive and it was boring. Things that require you to be really detail oriented, especially things that were tedious. It was during one of those projects that I was having a conversation with one of my coworkers who was telling me that maybe I have attention deficit disorder. Now that wasn't the only time that I had heard that. I had heard it multiple times actually, and so, you know, I finally decided to make an appointment with the doctor and talk to them. So I told the doctor, hey, I'm really struggling at work, I can't focus, I can't pay attention. I started picking up smoking just because I would get so anxious, and so it was bad for my health. So before you can get medication for this illness, the doctors have to make sure that you really do have something. So I went through a rigorous exam. They ask you questions about everything from how you were when you were going to school, to how you handle tasks and personal relationships, and a bunch of other stuff. Now in this questionnaire, a lot of the things that I was checking off actually describe me to a T. Did you act out in class when you were a kid? Did you have trouble finishing your homework? Or do you blurt out things that sometimes could be offensive and you don't really think about it? Or do you forget blah 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 blah? All those things that were happening to me were on that piece of paper except for two. So at the end of this test, I went to the doctor and I said, hey, so I have a question about these two because they kind of don't describe me. And he looked at it and said, look, just stop. 98% of the stuff that you answered here points to you having attention deficit disorder. I think these two are kind of like a toss. Doesn't really matter. It was then that I realized, holy shit, you mean none of that was my fault? So they gave me some medication and it kind of worked. I mean, I was more focused, I felt awake. However, there were some drawbacks. One, I was always mentally exhausted at the end of the day, and my mood was kind of erratic. It almost felt like I had 5 cups of coffee. I mean, these things are narcotics, they're classified. Of course they're gonna give you some stuff that's gonna make you feel all kinds of weird. But it was helping, and it was helping me accomplish the work, so I kept on taking it. Eventually, I stopped taking the medication. You may be wondering, why did I stop taking the medication if it was working? Well, because the assignment that I was working on that was causing me all that trouble that got me to go to the doctor in the first place finished, and I was able to go back to doing the work that I was really good at. I was training, I was talking to people, I enjoyed the work. I also stopped taking medication because I saw a video that I'm going to share with you right now that talks about a ballerina.
She's a choreographer and everybody knows her work. She did Cats. Gillian Lynn. Anyway, Jill and I had lunch one day. I said, how'd you get to be a dancer? And she said it was interesting. When she was at school, she was really hopeless. And the school in the 30s wrote to her parents and said, "We think Gillian has a learning disorder." She couldn't concentrate, she was fidgeting. I think now they'd say she had ADHD. But this was the 1930s, and ADHD hadn't been invented, at this point, so it wasn't an available condition. People weren't aware they could have that. Anyway, she went to see this specialist. So this oak-panelled room, and she was there with her mother, and she was led and sat on this chair at the end, and she sat on her hands for 20 minutes while this man talked to her mother about all the problems Gillian was having at school. And at the end of it, because she was disturbing people, her homework was always late and so on, little kid of 8. In the end, the doctor went and sat next to Gillian and said, "Gillian, I've listened to all these things that your mother's told me. I need to speak to her privately." So he said, "Wait here, we'll be back. We won't be very long." And they went and left her. But as they went out the room, he turned on the radio that was sitting on his desk. And when they got out the room, he said to her mother, "Just stand and watch her." And the minute they left the room, she said she was on her feet, moving to the music. And they watched for a few minutes, and he turned to her mother, and he said, "Mrs. Lynn, Gillian isn't sick. She's a dancer. Take her to a dance school." I said, "What happened?" He said, "She did. I can't tell you how wonderful it was. We walked in this room, and it was full of people like me. People who couldn't sit still. People who had to move to think. Who had to move to think. She's been responsible for some of the most successful musical theatre productions in history. She's given pleasure to millions, and she's a multi-millionaire. Somebody else might have put her on medication and told her to calm down."
After watching that video, I started thinking, maybe I'm not disabled, I'm just differently abled. I have different skills that are very useful in the right circumstances. I can't give anyone advice as to whether they should medicate or not, but what I can say is that if you have the option and you can do without medication because you're doing something that you find fulfilling and you're good at, rather than medicating for something that you just have to do, why do it? Anyway, I still have to finish my presentation for school, so I will be busy for another week. But I will try to do these videos, not necessarily daily. I said daily-ish. Oh, also, if you're on any of the other platforms like, Snapchat or Instagram and all that stuff, add me there too, because I try to post on those other platforms when I have a new video up. So, anyway, I'll talk to you guys tomorrow, hopefully.